Autistic? More like, aw, this dick. Hi, hello people. Welcome back to Paint Yap. In today's episode, while you watch me paint, I will yap about how Robert Fluoride Kennedy Jr. wants to eradicate me.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. We are doing this to our children.
And we need to put an end to it.
Okay, so what first put this notion that I might be on the spectrum into my noggin was actually a YouTube comment. Back in February, someone left a comment on my video about my bipolar 2 diagnosis that said, "I've recently got tested for ADHD and autism, and it seems like your symptoms may be similar to those of autism? ? I feel like that may be a possibility for you." My immediate reaction was just like, who, me? But soon after, I received yet another comment on that same video saying, "I don't know about that bipolar diagnosis. So many women with ADHD or autism/ADHD get misdiagnosed as bipolar instead." Not that I trust the psychological evaluations of randos on the interwebs, but I must say, it did get me thinking some thoughts. So I got curious and started doing some research into the scholarly literature, such as WebMD, for example. So many of the signs of adult autism I was finding rang quite a suspicious bell. Eventually, I formulated the ultimate research query: am I autistic? Google Gemini helpfully told me,
IDK bro, don't ask me.
So I took one of those free online adult autism tests that are probably as reliable as BuzzFeed quizzes, so many grains of salt were taken. But the results did indicate, girl, you got that neurospicy in you. The next time I saw my psychiatrist, I asked her what the autism diagnosis process might hypothetically look like, if that was hypothetically something I was interested in. She was like, "Not gonna lie, bestie, at least at the Stanford clinic, they're so overbooked that they're not even accepting people onto the wait list." I was like, okay, damn, that's that, I guess. I did not have it in me to even try to persist, because one, I was sick and tired of the medical establishment, and two, I was a bit preoccupied with some other things, such as surviving my senior year of college and surviving a chronic illness that had me sobbing in public from pain and exhaustion every other day. Fast forward a couple months, I graduated from college, moved into an apartment with the boyf, and commenced my journey into adulthood. And then in July, I received an Instagram DM from a kind woman who had discovered me through an article published by Artwork Archive back in the spring. In this interview, I talked about some fun facts about me, such as being mentally unwell and being physically unwell, and how these things inform my art. So this lady hit me up on the gram and shared that she had a similar history of trauma and psychiatric diagnoses, and explained that she recently discovered that many of her symptoms that had previously been deemed mental illness were actually just manifestations of neurodivergence. And then she asked me if I had ever considered whether I might be autistic. I was like, sheesh, the people are really on to me. The fact that strangers on social media geolocated me on the spectrum before the idea even crossed my mind might seem a little symptomatic of the deep-fried, chronically online brain rot dystopia we find ourselves living in. But hear me out. I think it's also kind of beautiful. Parasociality is real. Some people are in fact Lulu and believe that Timothée Chalamet is their lover. But I do think the relationship between a creator and their audience can be reciprocal in ways far beyond the exchange of superficial digital interactions. By broadcasting yourself outward to the world, you get to invite in wisdom and insight from far and wide. Also hate comments and trolling and negative vibes, but so much more compassion and curiosity. You get an opportunity to interface with people you'd never otherwise encounter. People who might understand parts of your lived experience that you haven't even begun to name. That Instagram DM was the final push. I had now finally skedaddled from the hellhole of school, and my GCal was emptier than she's ever been. Perks of being unemployed. A full-time artist. Since I actually had the bandwidth now, I decided to investigate this shit for real. Ooh, cliffhanger. This video was supported by my sugar daddy. JK! Even better, it was actually sponsored by Craftsy. I used to be a sketchbook girly, but sadly, no longer. One of my Stanford art professors gave me this piece of advice before I graduated. As a painter, I think it's very important to maintain a sketchbook practice. I don't, which is bad, but you definitely should. Drawing in a sketchbook exercises a very different set of muscles than when creating a polished painting. It's the private rehearsal for the public performance. So to help me get back into it, I started taking this 7 days of drawing class, which gives guidance on how to incorporate a daily drawing practice into your life. Craftsy is your go-to online resource for all things creative. With easy to follow, step-by-step lessons taught by expert instructors, they have more than 2,000 classes across over 20 categories, including painting, photography, knitting, and even cake decorating. If you're a sustainable fashionista, you might be interested in this sewing class, thrift flipping, how to upcycle fashion finds. If you're trying to get that bread, get that head, then leave, then Bold Baking Academy, all about bread, is the perfect class for you. To get your first full year of Craftsy Premium for only $1.49, click the link in the description below. What is this shit? After some online perusing, I found this telehealth provider that does virtual adult autism assessments called Prosper Health. At first I wasn't sure if they were legit, but then I saw they had good reviews on Reddit. And in Reddit, I trust. I wish I could say ironically that Reddit is probably a more reliable source of medical information than the United States Department of Health and Human Services, like joke haha funny, but unfortunately, I cannot. Overall, I had quite an excellent diagnostic experience. Prosper accepted my insurance, bless! I only had to wait like 2 weeks for my first appointment, and the psychologist who assessed me was super kind and affirming, and definitely knew what she was doing. The process involved 2 clinical interviews that were like 3 hours in total, and then a final results session for the big reveal. Before the interviews, there was an intake questionnaire that was supposed to take 10 to 15 minutes, or so they claimed, but I ended up spending 11 hours writing up a 13-page document because I wanted to be thorough in my responses. Autism behavior. I wrote a whole ass dissertation about my various sensory issues, social behaviors, emotional dysfunctions, and many routines and rituals and compulsions. There was another questionnaire that's supposed to be filled out by someone who knows you and your daily habits well, i.e. someone qualified to narc on you. So this ended up being my boyfriend testifying to how weird he thinks I am. For like the first year of our relationship, I was quite respectable and put together. But eventually I got kind of comfy and I started acting a bit more silly around him. Which, in retrospect, I think was just me feeling safe enough to stop masking. But he claims that I bait and switched him. Supposedly, I deceived him by cosplaying as a normal person and then revealed my true colors when he was already in too deep. I will neither confirm nor deny these allegations. Anyway, the interview process made me reflect on my childhood for the first time in a long time, which made me realize that many things I never really gave a second thought might have actually been a little revealing. Like the fact that I memorized 55 digits of pi when I was 6, and all the US state capitals when I was 9, and all the world capitals when I was 11. Or my phases of intense interests, collecting Japanese erasers, sculpting polymer clay charms, making paracord bracelets. Don't even get me started on my art supply fixations, Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils, Copic sketch markers, Strathmore 300 series Bristol smooth paper. Elite! I've always been violently repulsed by flowers, the way they smell, the way their petals feel. Ugh. When I was a kid, my biggest fear was this recurring vision of walking through grass barefoot with wet feet and getting little flowers and grass particles stuck to the bottom of my feet. Actual nightmare scenario. My best friend for years was a beige stuffed mouse named Muffet. I would write stories about Muffet and draw portraits of Muffet, and I would write letters to Muffet and write letters back to myself from Muffet, and I even made like a fake passport for Muffet. And then the big one, throughout my time as a wee lass, I suffered from debilitating social anxiety. I cried alone on the playground every day at recess in preschool, and cried on the bus to school for the first month of kindergarten, and cried in the corner at my friends' birthday parties and at summer camp. Basically, I had emotional meltdowns in any unfamiliar situation, and familiar ones too, but especially unfamiliar ones. I always thought I was just extra shy and grew out of it, like I underwent some spontaneous Pokemon evolution from introvert to extrovert. But it's a lie. I am not an extrovert. I just deluded myself into thinking I was. I think what really happened is that I finally learned how to emulate the things that one is supposed to do in a social context with other human beings. To this day, interacting with other people, especially people I don't know that well, is always exhausting to some extent. I almost never really feel embodied in these interactions. It's like on the inside, there's a little puppeteer directing my outer meat sack how to behave. My fundamental nature is being a hermit. I derive comfort from solitude. Loneliness is not something I often feel. A couple weeks ago, my boyfriend spent a week in New York, and I was alone in the apartment, and I missed him dearly, but I was also like, yes! Being secluded in my basement for my last 2 years of high school, other than the deadly catastrophic pandemic part, was honestly a good time. Like, rationally, I know human interaction is something I should do for my emotional well-being, and I do very much enjoy spending time with the people I love, but it always does take energy. I'm never able to be fully relaxed in the presence of other people, because when I'm being perceived, I'm perceiving myself being perceived, which means I have to constantly analyze my body language and word choice and tone of voice and facial expression and how the other person is responding to me and what they're probably thinking, and oh no, that sounded stupid and they'll never see me the same way again, or oh no, that sounded insensitive and they probably hate me now, etc., etc. You might be wondering, Miss Ma'am, if you hate being perceived, how do you do this whole social media content creator thing? Dissociation, baby! I have a plethora of other quirks of the neurodivergent variety. Until now, I didn't know they were autism-y. I figured many others wouldn't either. So I decided I'm gonna share some of my experience in case it might be illuminating for someone out there. Okay, for example, I am deeply irrationally distressed by sensory things like loud noises, bright or flashing lights, strong fragrances, car fresheners, and perfume make me want to die. Crunchy foods, spicy foods, like I can smell it when my boyfriend is cooking and adds red pepper flakes. It hurts me. I can't stand scratchy or tight clothes, driving over bumps in the road, getting food stuck in my teeth, the sound of metal utensils making contact with dishes, the sensation of walking on sand, the feeling of being wet clothes, heinous. Even just seeing water droplets on another person's skin, brother, ugh. And yes, I do dread showers. Getting tickled makes me want to scream and throw up and commit homicide. I wear sunglasses indoors all the time because the light bulbs be hurting my eyeballs. I've had panic attacks watching musicals, including Matilda and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, because I got so overstimmied. I had to wear my noise-canceling AirPods at my friend's poetry reading because the mic was too loud for me. One time, I dropped my phone on the floor and it was so aggressively startling that I started crying and hyperventilating. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? When I eat, I use only my fingers or my one special knife or my special spoon or my special chopsticks. It can't just be any utensil. It has to be carefully curated for shape and size. I eat basically the same foods every single day, and I have a precise procedure for each item I consume. Let us use a navel orange as an illustration. I first make an incision in the peel with the nail of my thumb from the stem down to the navel. Then I remove the entire peel in one piece. Then I separate all the segments and pick off the excess pith. Then I eat the segments from smallest to largest, and the first bite is always the end of the segment from the bottom of the orange, which is thicker and usually drier. Another example, if I'm eating like a stew with a mix of different kinds of beans, I pick out each type and eat them sequentially from least yummy to most yummy. Listen, I'm all for equality, but when it comes to legumes, there is a hierarchy. Like, I'll eat all the black beans first, then pinto, then cannellini, then kidney, then Great Northern, then garbanzo. I'm sorry, I'm a chickpea supremacist. And within each bean class, I eat them one at a time, smallest to largest. A final example. If I'm eating a plate of blueberries, I arrange them, you guessed it, smallest to largest. And then to differentiate between blueberries of approximately the same size, I lightly squeeze each one and then eat them from squishiest to firmest. I do not do foods where you can't easily separate the individual components and have to ingest multiple in one bite, such as a burrito or a burger or a sushi. If I'm eating a chocolate chip cookie, I pick out all the chocolate chips, then I eat the cookie part, then I eat the remaining pile of chocolate. And when I eat the cookie part, I have to eat it circularly. I take even bites along the perimeter in a clockwise direction. Bro, I knew I was strange in theory, but saying this shit out loud, I sound like a psychopath. I have a bunch of other arbitrary rules that I have to follow, or else, such as when I make my bed every morning, the tags of both blankets must always be in the bottom right corner. I have to press the wait button 3 times at every crosswalk. Every Google Doc I create must use Palatino bold size 16 center justified for titles, Palatino bold size 11 all caps highlighted in orange left justified for headings, and Proxima Nova size 11 for body text. If I'm recording a workout on my Apple Watch, I have to stop the timer exactly on the minute mark or on a repeated number like 45 minutes and 45 seconds. I log many things in various apps and spreadsheets and my Google Calendar. The exact time I take my meds every day, the pain severity of my period cramps, the amount of time it took me to get groceries at Trader Joe's, the day I start and finish every book I read, the brand and date of purchase and venue of purchase and cost per ounce and texture profile of every instant oatmeal I've ever tried. And if you're wondering, because you're definitely wondering, I microwave my daily oatmeal for 2 minutes and 22 seconds. There is unfortunately a lot more wackery, but I think you get the idea. I was previously diagnosed with OCD, but this never felt totally right to me. I don't have the distressing intrusive thoughts thing, and my compulsions aren't really driven by the anxiety that something bad out there will happen. Like, if I don't touch this doorknob 6 times, my family will die. It's more like, if I don't do this thing in this specific way, there will be chaos and disorder in my internal universe. It must be this way because it just must be this way. I was also diagnosed with OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is like an excessive need for control and order and perfectionism. But then a different psychologist I saw doubted this diagnosis because she said that people with OCPD usually don't have self-awareness about it. Like, they genuinely believe that their way is the right way. But I definitely know that something funky is going on with me. So I think my rigidity and repetitive behaviors are explained so much better by autism. That's something pretty major I've gotten from this diagnosis. A new lens to understand myself. To some extent, a label is just a label, but to name something is to give it clarity, give it shape. External validation of internal experiences can be meaningful, and for me it was. I talked to my psychiatrist and questioned whether my previous diagnoses might be a little sussy in light of this new information. And she said that while it might reframe them, it doesn't necessarily negate them. I think she was essentially trying to say, don't decide you're not actually bipolar and quit your meds cold turkey. But alas, who knows? TBH, part of me is still a tad dubious. It is in fact the case that many autistic women, especially women of color, are misdiagnosed with mental illnesses like BPD, bipolar, depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders. Obviously, these can co-occur with autism and are often even caused by the trials and tribulations of trying to survive in a neurotypical society, but the autism part is often completely missed. This could be because neurodivergence manifests differently across different genders. It could be because people socialized as women are taught to be caring and obedient and hyper-aware of social norms, which ultimately trains us to master the art of masking. It could also be because of dismissal and gaslighting by medical professionals, because hysterical woman, what does she know? However, these days, there's been increasing public awareness about autism and expanding conceptions of what it can look like and who can have it. Not just white people, not just boys, but shout out to them too. In the 1960s, the diagnosis was limited pretty much to only those with significant support needs, particularly people who were very intellectually disabled, had very limited verbal speech, or displayed visible behaviors like hand flapping and self-injury. In the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, autism wasn't even its own thing until 1980. Before then, it was classified as a form of schizophrenia. And it wasn't until 2013 that the DSM recognized autism as a continuum, grouping 5 previously distinct neurodevelopmental disorders under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. One of these was Asperger's syndrome, which was added to the DSM as a separate disorder in 1994. It was supposed to be like the mild, non-spicy version of autism. This is probably what I would have been diagnosed with if it still existed. Bestie Elon says he has Asperger's, and his acolytes have weaponized it to his defense, claiming it to be the reason why he did a Nazi salute at the inauguration of our fascist-in-chief. To my knowledge, the Sieg Heil is not, in fact, a common autism tic. Autism diagnoses have significantly increased in recent years.
Overall, the autism is increasing in prevalence at an alarming rate.
Precisely because diagnostic criteria are becoming broader and cultural understandings are becoming more inclusive. But some people attribute it to things such as vaccines, or Tylenol.
The use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay?
These people declare that this rise is an epidemic,
The epidemic is real.
implying that autism is a contagion, a pathological aberration to be eradicated. Hey yo, eugenics, is that you? The logic underlying this moral panic is that having autism is like the worst fate imaginable. The Lord's punishment for our sins. Hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, even if vaccines did have some teeny-weeny chance of causing autism, would it really be worse for your child to potentially be autistic than potentially be dead? You want your kid catching measles at Disneyland? A fun fact about evolutionary biology, brought to us by Sir Charles Darwin himself, is that this thing called genetic variation exists in every species. Because as every girl boss investor knows, rule number 1, diversify that portfolio. So thanks to this innovation, there are billions of Homo sapiens on this planet, and they don't all have the same brain. Crazy concept. What if autism isn't a disease, but simply natural biodiversity? Oh shit, I forgot they banned diversity. You might have heard of this philosopher named Michel Foucault. Bruh, that sounded so American. Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault, aka the Panopticon guy. In 1975, he wrote a book called Discipline and Punish, which I read in college, and it high-key hurt my brain a lot. Foucault conceptualizes discipline as basically a tool of control deployed by those in power to enforce homogeneity and produce pliable subjects. Our monocultural society is threatened by any deviation from so-called normality. Because if deviance were allowed to exist, then we would realize that normality is a construct fabricated by the oppressors to keep us in line and accept our role as docile, obedient sheep.
Oh no, she's infected with the autism and the woke mind virus.
I always find language so revealing. Neurodivergent, differing from neurotypical. Disabled, opposite of abled. Non-binary, outside the man-woman gender binary. These labels are not merely neutral indicators of difference. The implication of deviance is embedded within them. Their very structure is a negation of some norm, some standard for how a person is supposed to be. So therefore, there's some value judgment attached. Queer literally means strange, not normal. Asexual, because you're supposed to be fucking to perpetuate the species. Childless, because you're supposed to be fucking to perpetuate the species. Overweight, unmarried, racial minority, not like other girls, and so on and so forth. Transgression is dangerous because it opens up space for possibility. It denaturalizes what we take for granted as inevitable. It empowers us to imagine beyond the status quo. It makes us realize there's no single right way to exist in the world. No single right way to think or act or see or hear or communicate or move or love. It makes us realize that the way things are isn't the way they've always been or the way they have to be. What if collective liberation? It is not surprising that as deviants, autistic people, especially those with high support needs, are being targeted.
These are kids who will never pay taxes, they'll never hold a job, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write a poem, they'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted.
They're being demonized as burdensome blights upon society because we live in a world that equates a person's value with their economic productivity. Human worth is not intrinsic, but earned. Oh yeah? You want the right to exist? Then you better work, bitch. Again, language is revealing. Let us examine the terms once used to indicate the quote-unquote severity of autism. A person with so-called high-functioning autism might struggle with things like social interaction and sensory hypersensitivity, while exhibiting average or above average levels of intellectual ability and the capacity to handle daily activities on their own. A person with so-called low-functioning autism might be cognitively impaired or developmentally delayed, struggle significantly with communication and emotional regulation, and have difficulties living independently. This terminology is way too reductive. An autistic person can be quote-unquote high-functioning in some areas of their life, but low-functioning in others. Someone might be able to mask well enough to navigate everyday social situations, but have meltdowns when any spontaneous event creates even the slightest disruption in their routine. Could not be me. Someone might be non-speaking, but also a mathematical genius. I am booty cheeks at math, so that actually could not be me. But the whole notion of high functioning and low functioning is problematic on a deeper level. You gotta ask, functioning according to what standard? Because when you think about it, it seems that an autistic person is considered to be higher functioning based on how well they can approximate neurotypicality, be a useful contributor to society, and conform to the neoliberal ethos of individualism by not having to depend on other people for support. Unfortunately, all roads do, in fact, lead to capitalism. Thankfully, we have left the high-functioning, low-functioning bullshit in the past. Now, autism is classified by levels, which center on the person's needs rather than their deficits. Level 1 is requiring support, Level 2 is requiring substantial support, and Level 3 is requiring very substantial support. I was diagnosed with Level 1. I'm still figuring out what this whole autism revelation means for me, but I've been quite surprised by how transformative it's already been. Having a concrete explanation for why I am the way I am has helped me feel more justified in advocating for my needs. It has also helped me have a lot more compassion for my child self. I always felt like there was something wrong with me, and it was my fault. I was bad and unlovable. Healing my inner child moment. Realizing that I'm not alone in my idiosyncrasies, that there are other people who think and act and perceive in the same wacky ways, has helped me begin to erode some of the self-loathing and self-judgment that have become second nature to me. I'm doing a lot less shoulding myself these days. Like, why am I like this? I should be like that. Somehow, being diagnosed as officially not normal has given me a kind of permission to stop bothering to even try to be otherwise. Or at least to stop berating myself when I inevitably fail. TLDR, maybe I'm not fundamentally broken. Maybe I'm just
Built different.
oh fuck! The time has come for me to actually talk about this painting. It is called The Grapes of Math, which is the title of a book by this children's author, Greg Tang, who visited my elementary school to give a talk at our library when I was in first grade. From Mr. Greg Tang, I learned the supreme technique for multiplying by 5 that I still employ to this very day. First, you stick a 0 on the end of the number, then you cut it in half. I know this might be like, duh, multiply by 10, divide by 2, but when I was 6, it was like, whoa! Quick maths. The muses in this piece are my dear friends Mimi and Debbie. We were besties in first grade, then we kind of fell off for like a decade, but then towards the end of high school, we became besties again. So this piece is an homage to rekindled friendships, new chapters to old relationships. And, of course, an homage to the king, Greg Tang. This is the first painting I've made since graduating from college and setting up the new home stew. Before this, I hadn't touched a paintbrush in like 4 months, and I high-key forgot what I was doing. The muscle memory was giving muscle amnesia. I chose to paint this scene because I thought it would be a quickie to help me ease back into it. The composition is relatively straightforward, not too much complex detail, nothing crazy going on in the background. But haha, psych! It took me 120 hours over the course of a month. 15 hours on the dummy grapes alone. Epic bruh moment. To be fair, my long COVID symptoms have been kinda heinous lately. The migraines and fatigue have been a tad horrifically debilitating. And unfortunately, it's every day, bro. Some days are worse than others. One day a couple weeks ago, I had to communicate with my boyfriend by typing on the Notes app on my phone because I literally did not have the energy to speak above a whisper and he couldn't understand me. So this could perhaps be a factor contributing to my decline in productivity. But if I'm being honest, I think it is the case that I am becoming increasingly inefficient as a painter because I am increasingly caving to my tendencies to be anal about teeny weeny itty bitty details that bother me, because everything bothers me. Like the edge of a brushstroke being slightly too jagged or a single hair being slightly too thick. This obsessiveness unfortunately also applies to editing YouTube videos, which is why each one of these takes me literally 5 ever. I spend so much goddamn time trimming like 2 milliseconds off the end of clips, cutting out breaths and pauses, isolating and adjusting tiny snippets of audio to keep the volume consistent at under -12 decibels, increasing the color temperature by 100 Kelvin, manually typing up word-for-word transcripts of 40-minute videos to make sure I have accurate subtitles, repeating the same sentences over and over again until the intonation and enunciation feel right. Cause like, sometimes my voice cracks or does some funky shit. Sometimes I just do not like how I said a word. Sometimes I realize I put emphasis on the wrong syllable and it changed the sentence's entire connotation. So these words I'm speaking right now, maybe this is my 5th time saying them. You'll never know. I used to get so upsetty spaghetti at myself for being so fixated on these minuscule minor minutiae that literally nobody else in the whole wide universe would care about or even notice. But I'm working on the self-acceptance thing. because now I understand that this behavior is probably just a touch of the tism. Autistic, more like artistic. Sorry. If you made it this far, thank you so very much for watching. Here is a silly little bonus just for you. You know how I mentioned memorizing 55 digits of pi when I was 6? Somehow, 16 years later, I still got it in me. 3.141592653589793238462643843338327950288419716939371502 8841971693993751058209. Yeah, that's all I got. Bruh, why is someone mowing their lawn or something so loud?